Huh?
Hi, Vivienne. Welcome to Many Questions, the show where we ask each guest many questions about themselves and mental health. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Feeling good. Enjoying my tea.
What we're going to be talking about today, I guess, is a lot about ADHD. And I know that earlier that you mentioned being neurodivergent. What do you mean by that?
So, neurodiversity is a concept that looks at a spectrum of human brain functionality or human brain differences. So, you have neurotypical people that make up the majority of the human race. Their brain works and processes in a certain way. And then you have neurodivergent people, and our brains process differently to neurotypical people. So it's a way of looking at differences like ADHD, autism, Tourette syndrome as naturally occurring differences within the spectrum of the human race. In the same way that, everybody's human, but we all have different eye colors and different hair colors. Some people are short, some people are tall. Yeah, it's just looking at the naturally occurring differences rather than saying one is good and one is bad. It's like they're different and the differences require accommodations.
So, how did you first realize you were neurodivergent?
But I didn't. Someone realized for me.
Mm.
Um, so I was working for the National Autistic Society and I was always late for our appointments. And I remember one time I was late and I was like, oh, like I literally got on the train and went the wrong direction. Then I got off the train at the right stop and I went the wrong direction. And yeah, just explaining how I constantly get lost. And they were like, oh, that sounds like dyspraxia. Like I've got that. Maybe you should get tested. So yeah, when I got back to uni that summer, I kind of explained, and then they did a full assessment, and then they said I've got dyslexia and dyspraxia, and that was, I guess, like the first step into like realizing that my brain worked differently.
And just to clarify, it's not a mental health condition. This is something that you're born with.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
neurodivergence is different to mental health, although they cross over quite a lot, even in terms of like the way services are provided. But things under like the neurodivergent umbrella are things that are often genetic components. They're the way your brain is formed and the way our brain processes. Whereas mental health is often something that is a spectrum in itself, but you might experience symptoms of anxiety and depression because of an incident. So it's kind of in response to an incident. Whereas my brain is always going to be an ADHD brain. Like you can't cure it,
Yeah.
you know.
So, what would you say are the main symptoms of ADHD?
So you've got like three types of ADHD. You've got inattentive type, which is the difficulty to concentrate and sustain attention. So often that might be, yeah, struggling to concentrate on something, struggling to start tasks, like struggling with motivation, or like losing things, forgetting things. Like you might be seen as someone who they got their head in the clouds, like space cadet water meter type of person. And then you've got the hyperactive slash impulsive ADHD type, which is more like the restlessness, the racing thoughts. Yeah, if you were talking about it physically, it might be like physically struggling to sit still in like long, boring meetings, or like feeling like you got ants in your pants, like you got lots of energy. But then that can also be internalized, where literally your thoughts are just running 100 miles an hour. And then you've got like best of both worlds, where you've got combined, and then you've got elements of both those types. So the symptoms do vary a lot depending on things like gender, like what heritage you're from, because that will impact like how you're socialized and what you feel able to express. But it can literally be things like constantly losing your keys, constantly losing your phone, like struggling to start tasks that you know are like important, but because they're boring, the ability to just start the task is difficult. Struggling to stay in long meetings or to wait in line, for example. So yeah, that executive functioning is a good way of umbrellaing the difficulties with ADHD, which is yeah, things like time management, task initiation. There's different ones, and everyone's ADHD profile is also different. So it's hard to kind of say one or the other. Like some people find task initiation easy, but for someone else, like that's their big boss, that's their Bowser.
Love the video game reference. Yeah, I do have. I would say that my one crosses between the two. Sometimes, like even if it's a task I kind of like, because outside of work, I'm a filmmaker. I love directing. I love filming things and all that other stuff. But when it comes to editing, to sit back to rewatch my work and stuff, it's such a struggle. But this is my passion, and I wonder, and I guess this is how it well crosses over how it affects your mental health, because it's like, why can't I do this? Well, I really want to do this, and it starts, I start feeling more depressed because it's like, well, this
Mm-hmm.
is this is what I want to do, but why can't I do that? And
Mm-hmm.
I guess when it comes to the hyperactivity. When I was at school, it was always a complaint that like he never wants to sit in his seat. He always has to go
Mm,
walking around. He always has to do something. Sometimes I blurt things out in in class and stuff like
mm,
that. I still have that inside me, but I have to be more conscious to kind of like keep it bottled down
yeah,
and
masking.
masking absolutely. And some
Mm,
days it's just that I can't, it's like a struggle, and
hmm
I'm trying to mask it, but it's like a day when it's just like everything's haywire.
Mask off.
That's it, exactly, 100%. When it's really bad, I'm doing a little bit of what feels like thousands of tasks, but none of
Mm,
them get done. It's always
yeah,
just a little bit, and everything is slow
increments.
increments. Yeah,
Mm,
I'm always getting closer and closer to the finish line, but I don't. But
hmm
when there's a deadline or something, then this is me. I'm all around the clock. At 4 o'clock
Yeah,
in the morning, I'm still doing these things because I have to do it, and
yeah.
I don't want to let somebody down. But it's almost a way that I'm able to cope with it, which I know in the long run is not good, because this is when you start experiencing like burnout and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. They talk about the ADHD brain and the difficulties with dopamine receptors and the dopamine that gives you that reward feeling like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna get a reward. Like our receptors are different to neurotypical people. We only get that dopamine hit in those extreme situations where, okay, the deadline is now. So that rush is enough for us to then like stay on the ball, and then we're able to hyper focus because now it's like flooded through. Whereas somebody else can be like, oh, okay, I've got 2 weeks, I'm going to start now and then do it in bits. But like you said, it can be with things that you're interested in. Like I think a misconception is like we're able to hyper focus on things that we love. It's like, yeah, we can hyper focus. Actually, you can hyper focus on anything. Like you can really hyper focus on a random rabbit hole on YouTube about an Amish community in
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in the US. Like it can just be something random. But just because we can't concentrate on something in that moment, it doesn't mean we actually don't care about it. And I think that's, like you said, how it impacts self-esteem and like our mental health. Because you're like, why can't I just do this thing? Like I want to do this thing that brings me joy, but my brain literally just won't work with me right now. And then that's where like the accommodations and getting the right support so that we can actually live the life that we want, rather than like our brain just rule us whenever it wants.
I guess with that, what would you say are like the main misconceptions with ADHD?
I think the scariest one is when people say that adults don't have it.
Oh yeah.
Completely incorrect. Please never say that again. Other ones is like this concept that it's a very gendered diagnosis. Like there is no evidence to show that men are more likely to have it. It's just that the symptoms in women look different to men. So I think the concept of ADHD being focused on the hyperactive, and the name in itself is not very helpful. That's a big misconception. Like you can be like sometimes I am like visibly restless, but sometimes it's actually like my brain is moving. Me myself, even though it's my brain, I know this is too fast. From the outside looking in, it looks like I'm just daydreaming, but actually I have thought of 17 scenarios of what could happen in the next 25 minutes. So I think the misconception of what it looks like between men and women is quite a big one. And also this idea that like, everybody's got a little bit of ADHD, like it's a behavioral thing, or it's, people aren't applying themselves. Nobody chooses to make life difficult. Like we don't I don't want this to be hard. I'd rather it's not hard. So it's like that assumption that people just aren't trying hard enough. Yeah, completely wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense when you put it that way. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna pretend that I have ADHD. Why would I want to do that?
But I think that's part of the misconception where people see it as like, oh yeah, now they're just trying to be quirky, or everyone's got a little bit of ADHD. It's like no, they don't see the struggle element of it, and I think that contributes a lot.
It makes it such a bigger struggle, especially when you're trying to tell people this is ADHD, and they go, yeah, no, it's not.
Mm,
It's just, and then they just make
mm-hmm.
up an excuse.
Yep.
So with that, did you find it difficult getting a diagnosis, especially being a woman?
I actually didn't find it very hard.
Mm.
I did it in 2015. The services weren't that scarce at the time. And because I was working for the National Autistic Society, I
Mm.
used a lot of the language that they use. And
Oh,
obviously I
right.
studied psychology as well. So I was like very purposeful with the language I was using to describe my symptoms. So my GP kind of didn't have a choice but to refer me onto that specialist clinic. And then after I did the autism assessment, they said I don't have autism, but they screen for everything when you go. So they then were like, oh, we're going to refer you to the ADHD clinic. So it was actually quite seamless in that sense. But I think if I didn't have the language that I got from uni studying psychology and from working for the National Autistic Society, I think it would have been a lot harder to get through the door.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think there was a research study done not too long ago, and it said that people who are like English is their second to like third language when they
Mm,
go to try and get help because they don't really have the words to really express what they're feeling. They tend to get a lot of misdiagnoses or not a
mm,
diagnosis at all.
yeah.
So, how does ADHD directly affect your mental health?
I think for me personally, it's a bit of a mix. I think the self-esteem stuff is quite difficult because you get diagnosed late. So you have like a lifetime of thinking something's wrong, but
Yeah.
not knowing what's wrong,
Mm.
but being like, oh no, clearly nothing's wrong because I handed in this deadline. In general, I think the self-esteem, a lot of people relate to the difficulties with self-esteem, like the guilt, the grief of like, yeah, I've lived my life without the support that I deserved. And I've internalized a lot of my ADHD symptoms as personality faults. So like that separation is difficult. And then also like a lot of people are pre-diagnosed with anxiety and depression because I think just going through the world not knowing what's wrong with you, like everything is really hard in comparison to everybody else. And the anxiety of like, oh my God, I don't want to forget stuff. So I'm gonna like overdo and overcompensate so I don't forget. I think that contributes a lot to the anxiety. Yeah, so I think those things come together a lot. Common comorbidity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I guess I experience the anxiety side, especially when it comes to like messaging people. And
Mm,
that's always been something that I've been really bad with. Like I'll get a message and I may read it and I respond in my head, but then something else will take my attention and I've moved on. Maybe it's I'm about to meet that person or that person's in front of me. Then I start thinking, oh no, I never sent that message to them. I
mm,
start feeling anxious, or they probably don't want to talk to me, or they think I'm a bad person and that type of stuff. I feel a little stupid how many times I have to keep explaining to somebody like this is what I do. But if you don't experience this firsthand, it just kind of feels like an excuse. And
yeah.
I just don't want it to be an excuse, like them to feel like this is just an excuse for like, I don't know, quote unquote bad behavior.
It's a hard one. Like it's that object permanence where it's like if you can't see it, it literally stops existing, which is why we lose things a lot or we
Mm.
forget appointments and why like visual reminders and visual planners are like really helpful because we're like focused on whatever's in front of us in that moment. Like, oh, look at this, look at this. And then all the other stuff is just it just falls to the wayside. But I think some people get it and some people don't. Naturally, I've found that a lot of my friends have ended up being neurodivergent as well. And that's
Mm.
probably because we've all kind of been a bit more accommodating of our mistakes and like missing things and forgetting things. But I do think like having really genuine, like honest conversations with people is the best step for them to like understand that it's not personal.
Mm.
Like please don't take it personal
Yeah, yeah.
because it's not. And not everybody will, and that's fine. Like we can't force everybody to be accommodating, but it doesn't mean that we don't deserve to be accommodated.
I guess with that, you were saying about writing things down and stuff and making lists and stuff. How do you manage your ADHD?
Ironically, routine.
I'm the same.
It's so ironic
Yeah.
because it's boring.
Mm.
And if I do a whole week and I've done everything on my routine, I'm like, my life is so boring. Like, I'll be sitting there like, oh my God, I should move countries.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is so dry, but it's very like containing to know this is what I'm going to do on this time. I have 2 days until X. Like, and for me, having that visually, like everything is in my phone on my Gmail. So even if I lose my phone, I can go on my laptop and see all the stuff that I need to do. Yeah. So I think having like visual planning, having a visual routine, like having exercise or some kind of movement in there regularly helps as well to just flush out everything. And for me as well, like in terms of managing the mental health, like the whole putting things in your schedule that are going to make you feel good, but also like creating gaps so you're not doing something every single day. Like even if you feel like you can, not doing that, like having
Mm.
rest times to like decompress. But I think a lot of it is about learning yourself, like trying different routines out and also like they will change as we change, like it doesn't need to be stagnant. So that constantly checking in. So I found like journaling and weekly planning at the start of the week really helps me get structure or I'm just like floating through time. Like there's nothing to hold on to. And I think meditation as well, that's been a big game changer for me. But I think everyone has to find stuff that suits them because naturally I think we are prone to getting overwhelmed, even if it's like by sensory stuff or just like our sensitivity to stress and overwhelm. Like we need to find ways to stay in our like window of tolerance and not be overwhelmed. So yeah, whatever suits you, I think slot it in.
Routines are incredible, especially
Mm,
because there'll be things that like, I don't want to do this, so I'm going to put this off. But if I know every Wednesday I have to do this at this time,
hmm
I just do it. So I guess with that, how could you support somebody with ADHD?
I think being compassionate with actions. So if they have missed something or they have forgotten something, showing grace. They do have impacts. It is frustrating if someone's late or if they forget something. But I think it's how we communicate those things, and not like demonizing the person themselves and seeing it as like there's a context behind what's happening. I think if you want to go that extra bit further and you have capacity, then it's trying to make accommodations for them where they have difficulties. So, like, if my difficulty is timekeeping, but I am very good at thinking of ideas, then you might, like, my friend gives me and my other friend a different time, like, start time to her events because she knows that we're going to be late. Cool.
Mm.
I don't mind that because it works. It gets me there on time. But then when it's time to like think of games or like, oh, where should we go out today? And it's like, oh, that's when my strengths can come in. So it's like seeing them in their like as a wholesome person and accommodating the difficulties, appreciating the strengths. And if you can't find like I was saying earlier, not everybody is for everybody, and that includes people with ADHD. If people can't accommodate us, then that's fine. Like there are spaces and people that will. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Vivienne. It was amazing talking to you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
If people wanted to contact you, how could they?
So if you want to learn more about ADHD babes, whether you're a babe or you know someone who's a babe, or you just want to know more, or you want to give us money, that's all welcome. So you can find us on socials on like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all under ADHD babes. Yeah, so you can find like all our contact information or our website, adhdbabes.com. If you want to find me specifically, I'm on all social media as well, under VVN Sings or Vivienne Isebor, but also like my @ is in all the socials for ADHD babes, so you can always link it through there, or vice versa.
Well, all your information will be at the bottom of this video, so if anybody wants to check it out, it's just going to be right there.
And we also have our own podcast, the ADHD Babes podcast. So yeah, feel free to check that out too.
Oh, thank you so much, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You too.